I'm Dan Clevenger, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Peru in 1969, 1970. The Great Ancash earthquake struck. It was horrific. Right there, just off the coast from Chimbote. It killed 80,000 people. It was a massive, massive earthquake. And it changed my life and Ann's life radically and forever, and badly. We were not injured physically, but we definitely suffered post-traumatic, now I know it's post-traumatic stress disorder. The earthquake was so surrealistic. I'm sure people who go through earthquakes can attest to this. The first thing is it's loud. The earth itself seems to be screaming. Buildings are falling, things are falling down, but it is so loud that you can't assign a noise to anything that you're seeing. So you see things coming down like this, hitting in our apartment, and a dust cloud comes up, but it's, just everything is just so loud. And the earth is heaving and moving, and cracks are appearing in the cinder block walls. And it was absolutely horrifying and terrifying. It lasted, I think, a minute, but time immediately slows down, and it seems like so long that this is going on. And you look at each other, and your eyes are wide, and your mouths are open, and you're trying to talk or yell or scream, and you can't hear anything because the noise is so loud. And it's just very hard to describe, very surrealistic experience. Of course, eventually it stopped, and we were able to say, well, are we okay? Our apartment, we were on the second floor, but it was built into the side of a hill, so although the building was destroyed, it didn't fall on us. We were fortunately did not have any physical injuries. Well, we ran into the bedroom, and a huge piece of the cinder block wall had fallen onto where we would have been asleep had the earthquake happened 12 hours later. And it immediately occurred to us, we knew we would have either been dead or so badly injured, hips, femurs broken. I mean, it was a huge piece on the bed. And who would have saved us in the dark with death and destruction everywhere around you? I mean, it was your heart is beating so fast, and that sense of how close we had come to being injured or killed was very powerful, especially looking at that bed. Then we ran to the window looking out to the street, and this was a Sunday afternoon, and down about a quarter mile on our left there was a large soccer stadium, and there, of course, they'd been playing soccer there, the men had. And so as we got to the window, we saw this large crowd of hundreds of men and young boys running with horrified, terrified looks on their faces down the street to the barrio over here on our right, again about a quarter mile, half a mile away. And those men knew that they were going to find their wives and their children hurt or dead and their homes ruined, which is exactly, of course, what they did find. Over in that barrio, there was a nunnery in which probably, I think it was at least a dozen American nuns were killed right there. There were 4 volunteers that were killed in this earthquake up in the mountains, whose bodies were never found. In a little town called Yungay, a picture of that appeared on the cover of Time magazine. They had a before the earthquake and an after the earthquake picture of Yungay. What had happened was that some dams had been breached, and the snow and ice and mud and rock had come down this valley and covered Yungay, which was a pretty big town, a good 20,000 people, and maybe 500 survived. The rest of the town was completely buried, in 20 feet of mud. And there were 4 volunteers in that town. And we had just visited that town about a month before that. And we knew at least two of those volunteers, young ladies. Anyway, so it was an incredible experience. The immediate danger was over, but of course we were surrounded by chaos. And it took the Peace Corps at least 6 weeks to get us out of there. The roads were ruined. It was very frightening. I don't really remember quite how we survived or where we went or what we did. I have a few memories, one of which is an interesting one, having to do with the we were there long enough after the earthquake. The United States military, this was during the Vietnamese War, they had sent down from the Panama Canal warships that were going to Vietnam, helicopter warships, came down to Peru in order to fly over the mountains to do some investigating and see what the conditions were in the mountains. And I can remember being in Chimbote, wandering around one day, and suddenly a chopper appeared overhead. They came down and landed, and about 4 or 5 Marines, U.S. Marines, came out of the chopper, and then the chopper lifts up, and of course they were immediately surrounded by a bunch of Peruvians, and they were looking around. You know, they had their radio on them, looking around. They didn't know where they were, and they saw me in the crowd, and I heard the man saying on the radio, "I see a guy that looks Anglo. I'm going to see if he can speak to me and knows anything about where we are, who he is." And so he came to me, and there I was, and I said, "Yeah, I'm a Peace Corps volunteer." And I could see the Marines were delighted to have me there, but they were also a little disappointed that the Peace Corps had beaten them to this catastrophe. And we were, you know, because the Vietnamese War was happening, and I think the Peace Corps, they thought, were filled with peace-loving types versus the warriors that were in the military. But at any rate, I talked to them. That very soccer stadium that I had described earlier was where the Peruvian army had set up a landing field, and they were there waiting for the Americans to show up. And I told the man, I said, we can get a truck. I have some friends. We'll get a truck, get you over there. I described to them where to send the choppers, and that's where they wound up going. So I took the Marines over to the soccer field, and they were very grateful. The commanding officer got on the radio and said, "We've got to have you come out here to the ship, you and your wife. Thank you for helping us," because they didn't know where they were really. So that was quite an experience. We never did get to the ship because other priorities intervened. Those guys were busy and doing very important things. But that was one of the experiences that we had right after the earthquake. But Anne especially, I think, and of course me too, but we were suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder. I know she wouldn't go into any kind of building afterwards.